also going to start, basically, as you know, I conducted a study for my doctoral dissertation, and I measured the effects of literacy with babies. And I'm going to explain the study and the procedures. This is my committee. I skipped this part at my last practice one, so I know that most of you guys do know this already, but just for practice. This is my introduction slide about me. So I was born and raised in Queens, and I've been up in the Hudson Valley for almost 20 years. The Shamrock is because I worked in schools in Dublin, Ireland, and worked with administrators, and I learned that there was an early childhood initiative that basically when a child was born into the district, homeschool liaison would touch base with the parents once a month until they came to school. So if they needed any help, if they needed any coaching, if they needed any support, they had somebody to ask and they weren't intimidated. I presented at the National Kindergarten Conference in Las Vegas in 2009, and I also presented my research at Pembroke University in England and worked in classrooms in both Oxford and London. They also had a lot of early childhood education over there that I felt that we were lacking here. So I took my notes from those experiences, and I kept trying to get people to listen to me about the importance of reading to babies, and we as teachers know how important it is, but there's no real data out there. So I created a nonprofit organization called Baby Step, which most of you guys have helped me with, and I appreciate that very much. My secretary's right here. And basically what we do is we give books to babies at ORMC in an effort to promote literacy. So every time that a mom is discharged with her new baby, she gets a new baby board book, and there's information on the website as well. So hopefully it's just getting the message out there. This little guy, I worked it in the classrooms. Actually, this was in an orphanage in Belize in 2011. And hello, thanks, Frankie. That's Frankie, man. And Taft University. I was blessed to get a scholarship in 2009, so I've been working on this for a very long time. And to my defense is a week from tomorrow, so thank you so much. Okay. As my introduction slide, please somebody tell me what is something that you observe or something that you see. You see the book. Thank you. Anything else? Looking at the book. This child over here is so engrossed that her mouth is open. These three are all paying attention, but if you look a little bit further, which it might be hard for you to see, this guy is on his head, this guy's looking down, and this guy's leaning backwards. And as a kindergarten teacher, I've noticed for years, as many of my colleagues, on the first day of school, it's very clear to see which children were read to as babies and which ones were not. It's probably, I would say, 5 minutes, you could tell. It's that clear to us. But there's no documentation out there. And therefore, I think that we get overlooked quite often when it comes to funding. And let's face it, kindergarten isn't even mandated in California or New York. So we're not getting them until they're 6, which is way after peak. And I'll explain that more. So far, so good? Awesome. Too fast?
No, but I like your introduction.
Thank you. And I love positive reinforcement. All right, this is my nephew on top. Basically, the problem is that kids are struggling in educational settings across our country. With new initiatives like No Child Left Behind, there's a lot more standardized testing, and kids are floundering. And I don't think that people realize how important early childhood reading is. I've been an ENL teacher, ESL teacher for many years, and I would say 12 years ago during parent-teacher conferences, many of my Spanish-speaking parents would say that they weren't reading to their kids, thinking that reading in a different language would confuse the children, when of course that's not the case at all. So it's just lack of knowledge that's out there. Even if a parent is illiterate, they could still talk about what they see on the pictures at every page, and that's also going to develop vocabulary. So it's really just getting the message out there of how important early childhood reading is. And we need to provide tools that they need so that they can be successful in the future. And the purpose of the study was to measure the effects of reading with children, and especially what I focused on, the two variables were attention span and engagement. Those are what I measured during the study. It was a 28-day study, and the questions basically, I had to separate them in 2 phases, which you can't see this side of it. The phase 1 was during the development, and I had a small dissertation committee that helped me decide what would be the best things to look for in the assessment so that we can measure the growth of attention span and the growth of engagement, and also what should be included in the training video for parents. That was the first part, so I had to do that before I could even get to the study itself. And that was developing the tools for the study. And then the actual heart of the dissertation was the 4 questions. One was, how does daily reading to 14 to 28-month-old infants affect attention span? And the second question is, how does it affect engagement? And the third and fourth question I found very near and dear to me. I wanted to show that regardless of where the kids come from or what their socioeconomic background was, this is a benefit that we could do with all children to see growth. So that was, I wanted to say, despite socioeconomic status was my question for 3 and 4. Perfect, great. Okay. Now, there were a lot of things that I analyzed. Chapter 2 was my literature review, over 100 pages of research. So try to squeeze that into a really quick slide, and as you can see, I love brain stuff. So what I did is, the first chapter was evaluating cognition and brain development. And basically the way that that relates, every time that you see a spark, that's a synapse. That means it's a trigger so that learning could potentially come. From that spark, it either can go for short-term memory or long-term memory, which is a different category. For people, not children, people that are stimulated during development, this is a well-nourished, exposed dendrite brain cell, and this is one that was neglected. So you can see it's not only the number of brain cells, but also by having more branches, there's more chances that they're touching and that there'll be electrical impulses. So when we're reading to babies, we're pretty much really building brain cells. This I found very important. This is 36 weeks gestation, newborn, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. This is brain cells. They're developing. They peak at 2. And basically what happens if you don't use it, you lose it. We're born with more than enough brain cells than we're ever going to need. But my theory is that if we can stimulate children before this, they won't lose as many brain cells, because then synaptic pruning happens. So you can see, and that's with all children. Okay? So if they're seeing more books, if they're seeing more prior knowledge, more vocabulary words, it's going to be more connections for them. Oral language acquisition, when they're reading a book, they see words that they wouldn't normally know. They're exposed to different ways of saying it. Attachment theory and family involvement. Of course, one of the moms reported, and I have it later on in the slides, that it became such a good, not tradition, routine for her that she just loved the cuddle time that she got with her son, and that he'd bring over the book every night. So even when she forgot, that it became such an important part. And you might possibly remember your childhood if you were reading with a parent. Socioeconomic status and school readiness. We all know that kids at risk areas come in less prepared. And I think that this is a really simple solution to help those kids. So we might not like that a toddler's on an iPad. However, if we inform parents, maybe they'll put them on ABC Mouse instead of an inappropriate game. Maybe if they're on YouTube, they'll put on a read aloud or a story instead of something that's not appropriate. The importance of play and exploration. You know, I'm all about constructivist learning, and I think that is being taken out, it's being stripped from our classrooms, and we really need to get it back in. So I'm not saying just read and start learning at birth and all that, but make it fun. So when you're reading, it is fun. I mean, I love when I'm reading with my kids, just doing read alouds because of the conversations that come up. It's a fun and enriching opportunity. The kids aren't like, oh, I don't want to read a book. That usually comes when they're older. But for the little guys, I mean, it's a way, what they do when you read it on the carpet, for my kindergarten and first grade people, what do you usually see them doing after they read a story that day? If you read a story about cooking, what do they usually tend to do later? They're talking about the cooking, they're acting it out.
If we still had our kitchens,
If we still had our kitchen, it would be ideal. But they're playing. So when they're playing, according to Glasser, 80% of what you conversate or you act out goes into long-term memory. 95% of what you teach someone else could possibly go into long-term memory. So that play is really important, so we have to try to keep that in as much as we can. And the literacy studies and global research, basically what I did is I looked at countries that had high literacy rates, 100% literacy rates, and I compared what they were doing. And I found a very strong comparison as far as all of them having that early childhood intervention. In China, they start reading to their children in utero poetry. In Finland and in Norway, they have 52 weeks paternity leaves Actually, let me think. It's 46 weeks at 100% or 52 weeks at 80%. So just imagine that you did not have to worry about paying your mortgage and feeding your family, that you could stay home and create all those enriching opportunities for children. We have 6 weeks here. So we really, and America has one of the least amount of time. So it's something that we really need to work on. Not in this room. And of course, all of that leads back to the benefits of ULAB. Thank you, Andrea.
Oh, no,
If anybody has to leave, I won't be sad. I know that community has to.
I won't be sad.
I completely understand. Okay, the description of the methodology, which is basically how I'm rolling out this study, I did something called the 3-factor mixed ANOVA, and it measured first attention span, and then I did it again to measure engagement behaviors, and this will make a little bit more sense in a few minutes. The 3 factors I looked at was time, because the assessment I was going to conduct took place on the first day, the middle day, and the last day. So it was the first day, the 14th day, and the 28th day, since it was a 28-day study. I had 2 groups. One group was my intervention group, and they read books every single day, scripted books, which I'll share with you. And the control group only read 1 book 3 times, the first, middle, and last day. Both groups recorded that session on the first, middle, and last day, and then I would score it. And then socioeconomic status, because I wanted to show that it didn't matter the background, what it was. And at that point, I wasn't sure. The independent variable is the read aloud, and the dependent variable is attention and engagement. Am I in your way, Mark? Can you say
No,
that?
you're fine.
Sorry, it took me a moment to ask. These are the Vistaprint is great. These were my flyers that I started. They were just regular postcard flyers, and the one on your left I put out, and it says, looking for infants 28 months old, under 28 months old to be part of a free dissertation study. And despite the fact that I sent out 8,000 of them, really pretty much all my other babies did not come from this avenue. But what I did learn is most of the babies that were joining had a previous reading routine. And because it's a moral and ethical study, if they did have any reading routine, they were automatically in the daily reading group. So then I found myself very short on control group babies. So then I tried this attempt. Looking for infants 14 to 28 months old to be part of a free reading study, specifically babies that do not like books. And if they get up and run away, that's even better, because I was trying everything possible to get them in. That did work a little bit. Okay, recruitment, I added this slide, Catherine. I sent out about 8,000 postcards. The best part of this process was the amount of networking that I had to do and the amazing people that I've met. The study was mentioned to recruit babies in London and in New York. I had my first televised interview, which probably nobody besides me has seen on Time Warner Cable.
I see.
We were mentioned in Northeast England. We were in an Australian newsletter. Early Head Start programs, Kiwanis, school PTO, literacy centers, apartment complexes, WIC offices, childcare, social media. So I put all these things out, and even for the libraries, what I did is I would just sit and look. I made sure I got a library from every state in the United States. And I spoke to the directors, and I would send things, but we really didn't get much feedback from that. And I divided those into populations. So I had 4 populations. The daycare and the early Head Starts. And the early Head Starts, what started before I got IRB approval, I had 4 or 5 early Head Starts that were in. I went to the facilities, I presented the information, I trained the teachers, had 45 babies. Great way to start. And then we learned that many of the children were here they were from migrant families, and the parents didn't feel comfortable signing permission. They didn't want to sign any document. So therefore, they couldn't be included in the study. So then we lost 45 babies. So I actually didn't have any from Early Head Start, but the idea initially was it was going to be a family-school collaboration, so that the daycare provider or Early Head Start would read Monday through Friday, and then the parents would read on Saturday and Sunday. So for Saturday, I made sure it was a wordless book, and then for Sunday, I made sure it was a book that was offered in many languages. Even though it didn't work out, it was planned well. Libraries and community centers, healthcare providers, pediatricians, and we went into women and children centers, and social media. As most of you guys are probably here, on Facebook I have the baby step page, which then became Maybe because I couldn't be a baby step. But I had about 4,000 followers on there, and that's how I got out most of my information, and that's how I recruited most babies, especially the ones that were abroad. I learned how to tweet, sent out 1 million tweets. I learned how to Instagram and Pinterest, so I feel like I'm getting more technologically savvy. But I would say 99% of the infants all came from social media. Okay, the procedures. If somebody contacted me and they wanted to join the study, this is basically what it looked at. I would send them the parental consent form, which was approved by the committee. Once I received their consent form, I would send them the school little survey. This is an example of one of the pages that they could just do quickly on their iPhone. From that, one of the questions I asked was if they had a previous reading routine, background information like socioeconomic, demographic information, and then I would assign them an ID number. And the first couple letters would be the location from where they came from, and the next would be the next sequential joiner. So, if I had the 5th baby from New York, they would be NY5. The 6th baby from Indiana would be IN6. So this way, from the ID number, at least I kind of had an idea where the babies were coming from, and then I kept everything, of course, logged because it was confidential. I then sent them an email YouTube training, which was my first webinar. WebQuest, I don't even know what it's called, but we did it. And basically what that did is it told the parents what the procedures look like, but also how to hold the video camera when you're reading, because I had to look at the baby's eyes and hand movements. So if the video was down too far and I couldn't see that, I couldn't use the video. And unfortunately, I had to drop out some of the participants because it wasn't a true representation. And also that they were to read and record, brown bear, on the first, middle, and last day, and send me the video so that I could score it. And I'll show you that. So this is the schedule of books. So Wednesday, no matter who joined the study, it was constant enrollment. So Wednesday for me was always the recording day. So I might have somebody starting and somebody finishing on a Wednesday, but I knew to expect a video so that I could score it, and that just kept me on target with my calendar. So all babies in the study were always reading Brown Bear on a Wednesday, except the control group were only reading the first, middle, and last Wednesday. All babies were reading Pancakes for Breakfast on Saturday. So this way it gave some consistency to the study. So for the intervention group, they received this calendar, and it says record and upload on those days, just to make it easier for them, where the control group only has Brown Bear. And for those not familiar with Brown Bear, it's Brown Bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. So it's that constant repetition. What time did I start?
18 minutes ago. Says your timer.
Okay, so this is my scoring rubric, and I'm going to show you a completed one in a minute to make it a little bit more clear. But basically on this side, on the top, it says attention. For engagement, we broke it down to 3 categories. So the first thing I was looking for was manipulation, if the child reached for the book, if they tried to turn pages. Verbalization was if they either mimicked the reader, or if they copied, or if they made any words. And facial expressions, because it really was important to me that I wanted to show they enjoyed it. Most of them were smiling a lot at the end. They weren't being forced to do this. And then unconstructive behaviors that I just wanted to keep an eye out for is how many times they looked away from the reader. Thanks, what is this?
Good man,
Thank you. How many times they would try to get down, how many times they were crying or whining. So not only was I just looking for the positives, but also just trying to calculate the negatives as well. All right, let's see if I can use the new handy dandy buttons. I know the sound's not there. This is one baby in intervention group, New York 142, so he was a 142nd baby to join. As you can see, he is not having this at all, not interested in the book. And from part of the training, I said to the parents, if they want to get down, let them go. Just continue reading and hopefully they'll come back. So he's able to regain his attention probably for about 6 or 7 seconds. And then he's done again. And he's out of there.
Day one.
Day one. And then mom says, I know it's hard to hear, but mom says this just isn't working. Because you could hear that she was frustrated, but she tried, and I would always provide feedback. This is the part I always do wrong. Okay. Just to keep them encouraged, because a lot of times the parents get discouraged and then they don't do it again. I was like, I promise, if you just continue to do this. And I'm going to show you more of that in a little bit. So this baby is New York Chew, so the second baby that joined. And this is what one of my scorings look like. So I tried to do each one a different color just to differentiate. But I took the amount of seconds that the baby was looking at the book or looking at the reader over the total amount of time. So for this one, this baby on the first day had an attention span of 57.41%. On day 14, it was 77.56%. And on day 28, it was 98.44%. For behaviors on day 1, and I wrote things like laughing. And over here, as I said before, the pattern is, what do you see? And the baby said, let me think. So she was responding, so building her comprehension skills. She had 24 positive behaviors on the first day, 78 on the 14th day, and 103 on the 28th. And as far as the negative side, she had 29 negatives on the first day, 5 on the 14th, and 2. So the negative behaviors also decreased. Even though I sent out endless flyers or postcards, I had approximately 150 that were recruited and that took part in the study. For some reasons or the other, one of the common things that happened, which is a positive thing, not for me personally, but it's a positive thing, once the parents started reading to their babies and realized how the babies were reacting and it was positive, the baby wanted to read more and mom would read more, which is great, but I had to drop them out of the study because they weren't no longer in the control group. So I had 150, but 114 only had solid data that could be analyzed. The awesome part is that there were babies from everywhere. We had babies from across the United States, the United Kingdom, Singapore, Malaysia, Canada, Finland, Australia. There was one more that I'm forgetting right now. But most babies were New Yorkers. There was 49% from New York, 28% came from other states, and 11% were from abroad. Okay, the mother's information, most moms fell between the ages of 31 and 35, 1.8% were 41 or older, and 7.9% were 25 or younger. And it was more for the parents that completed the study that we can use the data. It was a little bit more heavier with the bachelor's degree and the master's degree. I was really trying to promote like the less than high school, some high school, and trade, which is mainly up here. For the baby information, we were a little bit boy heavy. 57% were boys, 43% were girls, and most babies, 90% of the babies, were under 24 months old, with the biggest population being 32% at 14 months old. Okay, this is the good stuff. Basically, the black line is the intervention group, the babies that were read to every day, and the green line is the control group, babies that were only read to 3 times. So this is for attention. So it shows that the babies that were read to every day had a gradual increase in their attention score, where actually the control group had a decrease, it went down, which that was surprising to me because I wasn't sure if it was going to stay constant or decrease, and it did decrease. So that meant the babies were real turned off if you didn't have a constant routine. For attention. For engagement, there was a higher growth. So babies that were read to every day had a straight up amount of growth. And those babies were almost, the control group was almost constant with a slight decrease for the next 14 days. And for negative behaviors, now it's reversed. The intervention group is on the bottom because the negative, the bad behaviors, decreased as the days went on, where the negative behaviors increased in the control group. Is that clear?
Damn you, you're presenting me this book again?
Yes. Okay, now this is that same baby that ran away on day 28. Tab and zip. Dad's gonna turn the next page, he even like leans his head over a little bit to, in anticipation of what comes next. He starts reaching for the pages. But this is only 28 days after the first video. He went, his first video was a 5% attention span, this was a 97%. I tried to get, I don't know if Mom comes out on the end of this. Mom says, oh, that was great, that's the first time he ever sat for the whole story, 28 days later. Should try to get that one back. Now this has a lot of information, so I took day 1 to day 28 and I put that in the middle in red because I think that's the most important information. But basically, in simplest terms, the more stars or any stars is significant. So if one of the categories has 4 stars, that means that it has it's statistically significant with 99.99% accuracy. So that's really pretty close. If it has 3, it's 99.5% accuracy. So basically here, and I don't know why you can't see, I apologize, but this is the group. So that means that there was a strong correlation with the data determining which one was a control group and which one was an intervention group. There was a strong correlation with the gender of the infant, but if you remember back before, we had more boys than girls, so that was the reason for that. And this is for attention, I'm sorry if I didn't clarify. And reading frequency, there was a very strong correlation. So babies that were read to more had more growth with attention. Now this is for engagement. So the group, once again, has 4 stars. The gender has 4 stars. The reading frequency has 4 stars. What's really important and really, really good for my study is if you look over here, mother's education, household income and race, they have no stars. So what that means is it played no role whatsoever in the outcome of the study. So it didn't matter what the socioeconomic background was, they all improved. Okay, my hypothesis was that reading to babies every day would increase their attention span and engagement, so I was able to accept that from the data that I just shared with you. And my hypothesis was the attention span and engagement of infants will demonstrate a statistically significant increase as a result of daily reading despite socioeconomic status, and I was able to accept that based on the data. This I just put in, this is some feedback from some of the participants, but just to show the variety of where they came from and things that they said. So I'll read it because I know it's hard for you to see. I have noticed that my son is much more engaged in reading, something that increased tremendously over the course of the study. He will now pick up books and say phrases from them and is developing stronger picture-object associations. He really enjoys reading and cuddling together too, so that attachment theory was built. My baby loves to explore books for fun now. That came from Malaysia. Singapore, this was such a wonderful opportunity to share with my baby. Thank you. Finland, my 22-month-old son and I very much enjoyed participating in the study. It was convenient and easy to do. These tools I will always remember. Thank you. Australia, my son and I loved participating and it helped me to stay focused and take time out to do this with him. I've seen great improvement and he now listens and copies everything I do at such a young age. It's incredible. At the end of the study, my son flipped through not only that book, but other books pointing to objects that he found familiar and began imitating words and recognizing sounds. All these babies were under 2. And the last one, we looked forward to our Wednesday sessions of videotaping and reading. We were always surprised and delighted by our toddlers' reactions, and now that we have these great little videos to cherish that we probably would not have made otherwise. And on the website, there was, from everybody that participated, who gave me feedback, so there was like, there's probably about 150 of them on there. But these, I figured, just to show the importance, it wasn't just a 28-day clip, they changed their routines in their home. Okay, almost done. Should put something in my drink, Mr. Capoletti.
Well, me.
Limoncello.
I'm starting to slow your words.
Conclusions and discussions. Educational leaders and policymakers, they have the powers to make real educational change. And by developing earlier childhood initiatives and parent collaborations, that's really what we have to do to see real serious change, in my opinion. The most substantial implications from doing this study is this now gives us evidence to show how important that early childhood intervention is. And it impacts all their future success. Because when they're reading, when they're with their parents, they're getting more self-confidence. When they have more self-confidence, they're taking more risk. And when they, you know what happens in the classroom when they take more risks. Oh, and then over here, I have the child in the middle. Parents, teachers, and administrators, we care about the kids because we love them, so we want what's best for them. But on a higher level, community members and policymakers, we're producing positive and successful members of society. So even small, we want to see them succeed, but on a larger scale, and of course, it's going to help our society as a whole. We want to establish educational settings that will produce productive members in an internationally competitive and collaborative future. And you know all about that educational gap. This is a strategy or technique that we can use to help close that gap so that all students, no matter where they come from or what their background, they could be more successful. They can show success in school. This basically, if somebody else wanted to continue my study, what would I recommend for them? The one thing that I found amazing, one of the biggest ahas of this study is I had a mom that was pregnant and she read to her baby and her 2-year-old completed the study. And she contacted me a few weeks later and she said, I had the baby and I want to know, can I do the study with my newborn? And I said, well, I can't use that data from school, but if you want to do it, I'd be happy to look at it for you. And the baby was 22 days old. And of course, engagement, she really wasn't saying words or anything, but her attention score dramatically increased in 28 days at 22 days old. So I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but it was that clear to see. So I would like to extend the age range. Also, I'd like to reach out to other countries. Something that I did, I had a mom contact me from Mexico. And at first, I wasn't too sure how it would play out because of the training. She had to understand what was expected. And she said she had a translator. And then I realized, as far as my role in it, I'm watching a video. I'm watching the baby's eye movement, and I'm watching the baby's hand gestures and things like that. So it doesn't matter to me what language it's in because I'm still going to get the scores that I need. So just making sure that the training is presented and the books are available in different languages would help us to extend it to other locations as well. Possibly extending the 28 days and seeing what happens with these babies. I would like to track them to see how they do when they do enter kindergarten, if they have higher kindergarten screening scores. And also, I would like to have a bigger bank of babies that have never seen books before. And I tried really hard. I went into David Moore Heights, I'd go into the laundromats, I'd go into WIC offices, at the Children's Museum at Poughkeepsie. I had so many parents that joined and they just didn't follow through. And I think that with coaching and with support, they would, once they see the benefits, it would help them. So I think this was a study done without any funding, so if we did have a grant, we could probably provide. There's a school in Harlem that has nothing to do with this. But they basically, the way it started, I think like 30 years ago, is he would stand on the corners, and when moms would come by with babies, he would say, I'm starting this new school. If you join the school, I guarantee they'll go to college. And he has a 100% graduation rate at one of the worst parts in Harlem. And now, so I mean, it's really just that consistency. It's that parent collaboration. He had good relationships with them, and everybody wants what's best for the children.
Is that Jeffrey Canada?
Yes.
Is that New York City.
Recommendations for policymakers and practitioners. There's a direct association between dropout rate and struggling readers. Kids that are struggling readers are at a much higher percentage of dropping out probability-wise. I think it's something like 75%, so it's significant. By identifying areas that are more considered at risk, even though I don't like that term, those are the areas that we really need to provide the most support to in a friendly way, even if we just stop in like once a month to the laundromat and just sit there comfortably, and if a parent wants to come over, just giving them unintimidating opportunities to approach us. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye. Parental awareness, support, coaching, collaboration liaisons goes back to before. It's really just, I work with Christine Rolando for Orange Literacy, and she has amazing resources, but a lot of parents are even intimidated just to come in. So it's really just reaching out to the community so that they feel comfortable with you, that they come back. Promoting early book programs, like Baby Step, and increased maternal and paternity leave. I think that is huge. The fact that we only have 6 weeks really is something that needs to be examined and hopefully changed in our future. Those babies are so tiny when the moms are going back to work, and then they come back and they're tired and they don't have the time to do those things like reading with their babies. Closing thoughts. It is our responsibility as a society to provide children with all skills so that they can be successful. Pursuit of happiness, life, liberty. And as I've shown you, hopefully, through this presentation, by reading it, not only is cognitive and intellectual growth, it's also social and emotional growth that can occur through reading with your baby. And by doing that, they will have the rigor that is needed for them to be successful, especially according to today's learning standards. And so that they can ultimately be successful members of a productive society. Change begins with us. And this is the little one up there. She was the 22-day-old. But you can see how they just mimic. This guy clearly has somebody in the house that reads the newspaper.
He goes to the bathroom, reads the newspaper.
Okay, how much time, Amanda?
It's 37 minutes and
Oh,
12
awesome,
seconds.
because what do you have to say within 40?
45.
Oh, you're good.
Questions or ways to improve it? Thank you. Thank you very much. You were a great audience. Any ideas or any suggestions? Did I talk too fast?
Oh, that was much better.
Great.
I feel that you may have talked too fast for you to think, because I noticed a few ums and uhs.
I know,
here
I'm
and there.
trying to be attentive to the ums. I can't stand when that happens and it's not me too. I just like ums. Thank you. Frankie is my former first grade student who's now graduated from high school and going to college, so thank you, Frankie.
Yeah.
Mr. Harnick has a question. Mr. Harnick, I'm sorry.
So, a couple of slides were difficult to read.
Okay.
Is that what the people at the dissertation will have? The hard
They'll
copy?
have the hard copy,
Great.
and hopefully, we were supposed to present this on the larger screen and we couldn't get it hooked up, so hopefully it's going to be larger when I present, but they'll also have a hard copy in front of them.
My other question is, did you find any research on the impact of modeling behaviors? Because I think that's one of the big problems that gets kind of overlooked, because it doesn't matter how many reading programs you have. If kids don't see parents reading
Exactly.
consistently,
Right.
they're not
It's
going to
true.
become readers.
That's true.
And even, I mean, in my classroom today with the Unifix cubes, they put them together and they turn them into cell phones because they copy what they see all the time. The good thing about the classroom part is a lot of times they're constantly mimicking me doing read aloud. So they're reading and they're saying, "Oh, are you sitting crisscross applesauce?" Like, I don't sound that way. But yes, and a lot of the TV shows, of course, that are on now. I'm a huge advocate for Sesame Street and PBS Kids, but like even if we could just direct parents to what is educational quality TV shows so that they can see that. But I agree with you 100%. Thank you. Any other ideas? Yeah.
Well, you clearly made the mark in the big question always, is it nature or is it nurture? And this is definitely in the nurturing. The only thing I have a question though is when the children are being read to, are they all being read to at a certain time during the day, or it's variable throughout the day?
I did have them commit to a certain time during the day. There were 2 babies that come to mind. One was sick and one had either it was a vacation or something like that. So that those babies had to be dropped out. But the other ones, they didn't all do it at noon, but they all had a consistent time that they were recording.
Because like in the early slides that you were showing where the child was very young, I guess it was probably early on when he was being read to, I know, having children, sometimes later on in the day when a child is tired, they're more receptive, or
Mhm.
maybe very, very early.
Mhm.
And the other thing, I know maybe it was not part of your study, but you did, which is wonderful, that you went throughout the globe with this.
Mhm.
Did you find, or were you looking at it at all, any difference from different countries?
Mhm.
The style at which the parent would read to the child, and was there a difference in the speed at which they, progressed?
The speed was still steady, and from each group, I tried to have an intervention and a control group, maybe from each country, just so I had that kind of balance. What's amazing is no matter where we're from, we all look the same with babies.
Right.
With the language and how they, I think their traditions were, of course, like I had some parents that, I had this one mom that she basically was on the floor with her baby all the time, and she did the first one when the brother came back, and you could see the brother kept on photobombing in the background, and the baby, so, like different things, and that's, I don't even know a country, but like, different things like that as far as the time of day did make a difference. But I feel like, in my honest opinion, I need to have more than just the two. Like, I had a bunch from many different countries, but not a significant population enough to really make, it was too much to be a generalization.
And just one other thing I just want to tell you from my
No,
background, which is
please.
very different than
I
yours.
appreciate it.
Is that I'm not that familiar with this dissertation, who you will be presenting it to, but I have a child who's a special ed teacher. Don't be afraid to be more serious, like your audience, which will probably be educators.
Mhm.
Like, you don't know where they're coming from. I know we're all friends and
Mhm.
people that you feel comfortable with. Don't be afraid of being very direct. It's like feel the audience out, like
Mhm.
feel the professionals out. Some people, as you know, have no sense of humor.
Yes.
And some have tremendous sense of humor.
Yes.
But I would err on the side of a little bit more conservative. I know you're dealing with all friends,
Mhm.
but that's just a personal thing.
No,
being a
no, I
public speaker
appreciate it.
myself.
Luckily, my committee itself, the Heart one, I had to present chapter 1 and 2 to already. And that's a part of my committee, and I know them personally because I've been working with them for
Great.
so long. But you're right, the other ones I don't, so
Okay.
it's something to consider, thank you.
You're very warm and engaging. It's wonderful. I wish I
Thank
had you
you.
as my teacher. I wish my kids had you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Were the people who read in Singapore and et cetera, were they reading in English or
Yes.
everybody
Yes.
read in English?
Yeah, I did invite others. I had for Malaysia, one had her friends that were gonna do it, and she was going to lend them the books, but it didn't work out.
So were they bilingual?
Which is another factor. Smart Coos, which was one of the recruitment people, she's from New Orleans, and she has a for-profit organization that teaches babies different languages beginning at birth. So I teamed up with her too, because I think also from my research, that young time with all that, that's when they're most sponges up till 2. So to immerse them in as many languages as we can, that's the best time to really get them.
And when did you start the study? Maybe the dates might be helpful.
Sure, yeah, it was 14 months, and it was June of 2014 to August of this past year.
And just one little suggestion, engagement. Explain what you mean by engagement early. When you keep talking about engagement, like I wasn't sure if you meant
What I meant, yeah. Okay, so it's later, I'll elaborate in the beginning.
just maybe once.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
And the people you're presenting to will be familiar with ESL, ENL, and terms like that? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, because I actually, in the dissertation itself, I spelled it out, and they had me use the acronym instead, so. Mark?
Very good presentation, I think it's
Excellent.
fantastic.
It really was
Was
excellent.
It was excellent. And I know you're scientific, this is great. I have a question that really speaks to, is there any wide notion or any thought out there, scientific or non-scientific, that says that what you're saying, how would I say, who would disagree with this? Is there any opposition? Like, would you ever speak on, would anybody, I think we all know, we said reading is fundamental. I think this is, like, there's a lot of work that goes into this, but is there any opposition that says that simply doesn't exist, or?
I think the opposition comes from not understanding what I'm doing, like for me,
Right.
like, I think if people are saying, oh, you need to start them at birth, like even like school or anything like that, like that's
Right.
not what we're saying. If we're saying just reading, and as you see me with the first little guy, when he was reading, the kid went away, if you keep on reading the expression, they're like, oh, he's interested in that, let me go see what's going on over there. They're gonna naturally come back.
Right.
So I think the opposition is for people like, oh, they're starting too early, or oh, they're trying to get them in school too early, which, you know me personally, that's
Right.
not what I'm saying.
Right.
So I think that's the only one that I'm aware of, but
Understood.
I'm sure there's always some. Frankie?
In that case, you may actually want to put that into your presentation, explain any objections that others may
Yeah.
have.
Okay. Put a slide in there as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because in one of the chapters I had to write down, I think it was chapter 3. No, it was chapter 4. I had to write down how my research aligned with previous research out there. And there really wasn't that much that was out there, but like, for example, in 1931, Washburn said that it doesn't matter, that kids shouldn't even have to learn how to read until they're 9 in 2nd grade. But that was 1931, so I was able to dispute that and prove that wrong. So most things out there are showing how important it is earlier. But I think it's the amount, and what's really important is that balance with play. You know, kids should never be sitting longer. If it's a 4-year-old, they shouldn't be sitting longer than 4 minutes at first. You know, and they should be balancing that with play and fun and enjoying it. And that's the one thing that I like the most about this. All of their facial expressions all increase. They all are smiling and laughing at the end. And that's the important part.
Is there any correlation between those countries that have 100% literacy rate and what age the kids start at school?
Well, for the countries that I evaluated, they have, because even with Norway and Finland,
Right?
they start and the parent has an option. So they have that option of being home for all that time for
Right.
maternity, paternity leave, but then they also get like a daycare allowance. So, you know, depending on, but those have, it's 1 kindergarten teacher per 3 kids in the setting.
Oh, awesome.
And that's based on a certain age too, so if that's the 2 and 3-year-olds, that's the population. And then 3 and 4, and they usually all tend to go back to school like around 5.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. But there is like that more of a structure, there's constant school-family communication.
Right.
And I believe that's what we're missing.
Right. I think we need to figure it out.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. If there's anything else that you have, feel free to email me, call me, you'll have my phone number. But thank you, I really appreciate it, this helped me a lot.
Thank you.